Well, one quick thing. I just want, I hope the people out there just say a prayer for Joe's wife and daughter, because it sounds like they were in the house when it was put on fire, and they got out and were taken away. So I feel really bad for them, and and then knowing Joe, I'm really finding it hard to believe that Joe did this, and that could be just me, from knowing the guy. And other than that, taking the personal element out of it, the neighbors, I thought it was interesting that the neighbors didn't really know the guy at all.
I thought it was interesting that they wouldn't even come to the door.
Yeah.
I mean, if something like that happened, I'd want to be sharing it with somebody.
Right. Or he was a great guy, or he was a mean guy, or whatever. You'd think you'd want to be telling people, and it was really hard to get neighbors to talk. Only one guy would talk with us on camera, and he was the guy that called 911. So at least he thinks he was the first guy from his opinion. So that would be interesting to find out if he was the first guy that actually called 911, or if it was somebody else, because he thought it was that they got there really quickly, because he was praising them for how fast they arrived on scene for the fire, the house fire at
that's all you keep on hearing on how fast the response time was. And I mean, 5 minutes during a fire can seem like a lot, but
yeah,
that's pretty quick.
That depended on where
the call to come in,
where the department is. But it was very very weird typing up Joe's name in the search engine and just seeing that picture, because that
that was haunting you all day, and you kept making the music association saying, "Is he a jazz musician?" I mean, I know him.
Yeah, and it's and I hadn't seen him in a couple years, but he, when I knew him, and I talked to a guy after I found that out. I called a guy that I knew him very well, and he'd seen him about 2 weeks ago. They were exchanging microphones because they were each doing different types of recording. So, but he said, out of everybody that he knew, Joe always seemed to have his stuff together, compared to, other musicians. And when you're in Austin, musicians usually don't have their stuff together. They're, a ragtag bunch. But Joe always was clean cut, dressed neat. And, maybe that's, if he was some sort of double agent or some sort of agent, then, I never saw it. So it's going to be very interesting to see what they come out and say about, when it's somebody you don't know, you have a totally different perspective of it, because my perspective has changed since, knowing that I knew the guy.
Right. Just to interrupt, I want you guys to go another 5 minutes or so, but go back to those reporters first, because that's key, that reporters think back to exactly what they were saying, Jason and Rob, because that's key, that they were saying this is weird, because the public doesn't know how reporting works, that an hour and a half after it happens, how do they already know all this?
Right. And these guys were, they knew exactly.
And then go back to the house and the neighbors. I mean, let's really debrief, really think of things you didn't think of.
Why don't you go first?
Go back to your memory. Think of what you didn't talk about.
All right. You were at the, you hit that press conference area first, so what were they talking about in the press conference when you got there?
So when I first walked up, there was a gaggle of journalists and their camera people, and they were shooting the building. So I walk around the side and tried to find a good shot. As soon as I got there, I noticed that there was a large group of official people walking up. It was Acevedo, Leffingwell, this fire chief, and so I squeezed into the gaggle trying to get in to get their comments. And as they were, giving us all the points that they had previously agreed to let go, you just kept hearing these whispers like, "Boy, this is really quick. I can't believe this stuff is coming out so quickly." And they just seemed really surprised at how this was unfolding.
Yeah, and when I got there, I was trying to go around a different way, and I got stopped, so I came back around, and I got a tail end of they were doing an interview with the fire chief, and she was, talking about how they had the fire pretty much under control. They were going to start going in and looking around, but at the time, somebody said, "Were you afraid the building was going to collapse?" And she said, "Oh, yes, we were definitely afraid. We've seen this happen before."
Right. And she made it sound very plural, though.
Yeah,
this was, a very common thing now.
Right.
And she even made it sound like it was now. Like nowadays, steel does melt a lot easier than it used to.
Yeah. or making steel out of flour or something. I don't know.
Yeah, it's Chinese steel.
But that whole situation was interesting. I taped a little bit of a guy who worked in the building. They were on one of the top floors, and they, when they said when it happens, they had done drills before. They once a month they do a drill for evacuation, and he ran around. They were telling people to get out of the building, get out of the building, get out of the building, and they cleared out their floors. I'm trying to think if I remember anything else from that area. I do remember seeing that car. There was a car at least 60 yards, 50 or 60 yards from the crash site.
Smashed in.
And it had smashed in windows.
It looked like a little scorched, too.
Yeah. So something, I don't know.
But there's no parking right there. I mean, that's a frontage.
It was a road, so obviously somebody was driving up. They might have been hit or something closer, and then drove forward a little bit to get out of the way, then got out of their car and ran.
Right.
But I don't know. I mean, there was a couple cops around the car, but that car was behind the police line, and it wasn't leaving. The parking lots of those businesses they had shut off to people. When we got there, we were on the back side of the building, on the south side, and that's where most of the people had gathered, and they were just kind of waiting to see what was happening. And at one point, an FBI agent and a police officer came up, and they were taking people in groups of 5 to their cars and inside the building if they had to go get their stuff, but they weren't letting them take their cars. They were still keeping that closed off.
Walking them.
I don't know if they were checking them out or how that was working. So then we got the text from Craig giving us Joe's address, and I'd never been to his house. I'd always seen him either at practice or at the gig, and so I had no idea where he lived. But we get there, and it's a middle class neighborhood. Seems like they probably have the HOA in effect because nobody had any political signs or anything anywhere out like that.
Very manicured.
I did notice Joe it looked like he had a ton of papers and stuff in his garage, like he didn't use the garage for the car, he used the garage as a storage area. And that looked like, because I'm sort of a pack rat myself, so I always notice those things.
Well, the media is already saying he's basically a Tea Partier, as we knew they would do before the media even said this was happening, which is the evidence of it being staged and my hunch being correct. We'll continue to cover this at 11 a.m. tomorrow, continuing tonight at Infowars.com. and PrisonPlanet.com. Anything else you gentlemen want to add?
I thought it was interesting that the neighbors really didn't know the guy. He'd been there for 3 years is what they said. One lady had moved in 4 years ago, and she said he moved in about a year after. Another guy had been there 15 years, and he moved, he said, I'd seen the daughter and the wife, but I never saw the guy. I never saw Joe. So I don't know if that just seems odd. Joe was always, personable. He wasn't outgoing, but he was never rude to people. I never saw him, act like that. But he was, kind of an intense, introspective type guy who seemed to be very intelligent. Very, very intelligent. Like I was, always kind of taken aback by his being able to throw out, different key changes from songs that he'd been, played 20 years ago. He's like, oh yeah, that goes to this, this, and this. So he definitely had some, musical talent. He was a bass player and a keyboard player.
Well, whatever happened, we're going to try to get to the bottom of it, and we hope this isn't a false flag, but the evidence is unfortunately all pointing that direction. We're going to go back to rebroadcast, ladies and gentlemen, for all the Infowars.com and PrisonPlanet.com listeners at 11 a.m. tomorrow. We'll continue to cover this. Why is it important? Not only has he died and somebody else is missing and 2 injured, they're going to use this to demonize the American people and the Tea Parties. As I predicted at the start of the show, before they even said it was Tea Party, it's now all over the news. This is the direction they're going in. This is just the second. We know the underwear bomber was staged. This appears to be staged. If this is confirmed, we're in deep trouble. The UN's now saying that there's a secret nuke in Iran. They want to go to war. They're moving the battle fleets into position. This is a very serious time to be alive. The bankers have been revealed as the shadow criminal government. The U.S. is in a depression. The world knows that. Europe's going into a depression. They need to stage crises to make themselves the saviors. This is perfect timing. I'm seeing media coordination from the neocons and stage liberal media. This looks bad. We'll continue to break it down. We're not backing off. We're going in, through, and beyond this storm. Great job, crew. See you back live tomorrow, 11 a.m.